Hello, friends, and welcome to Before the Wheel. Today we are joined by Vijay Babu, and I think it's very rare to find someone who has spent 3 decades and in an industry like IT that is so fluctuating and so much changing. He has seen the golden era, he has seen the beginning, and he has seen those times which we hear from other people. So I think it will be very interesting to know more about his journey and about the trends, the future of IT industry. So let's welcome Vijay Babu. Hi Vijay, welcome.
Hey, Aman.
How are you?
Oh, doing good, and thanks for having me in your program.
You're
So it
welcome.
would be good to have
Yes,
a conversation with you.
yes.
I look forward to
So first of all, it is very rare to see, like I said, to see someone who has spent so much time in IT industry, where we see it's very where we see so many changes in industry and people have tough time to to get accustomed to those changes and change themselves as per the trends. So how you are you able to spend so much time and with so much success? You have founded a lot of startups, and you were initially, you when you started was maybe in the like early 90s you started beginning your career, and now we have come so far. So what is the secret of your success and the secret of that you have spent so much time with that much success?
Okay, so firstly, I mean, success is relative, right? So it's okay. I would probably say that I had enjoyed my career
Yes.
phenomenally. I had
Yes.
enjoyed every year of my career, so that's one part of it. The other part, there are many people like me. I mean, having
Yes.
been in this industry for a long time,
Yes.
I suppose what you really mean is an old person
No, no, no.
in the industry from an experience point
Yeah,
of view. In
yeah,
some sense, I suppose my experience will be more than
yeah. My age.
your age, right?
Yes,
So that's
yes,
so I can probably bring in some different perspectives
yes,
to this whole thing.
yes.
So I started my career in 87.
87.
87. So right after I finished my masters from IIT Madras,
Okay.
I started out right after my college, my masters. I founded a company
Oh, okay.
right after.
Okay.
So I used to do two things. One is I happened to be the first person to have built or who have developed what was then called as a dongle.
Okay.
Earlier, you used to have these dongles that gets connected to a printer port
Yeah.
to prevent software piracy.
Okay.
Autodesk had it, and many other software at that time
Right. Right.
had it. So I kind of was passionate about it, and I built that product, and that was one part of the business I was doing in my company.
Okay.
It was called Visa Softs. I also used to build solutions for customers. I had built an automatic test equipment, a PLC, and the like, and
Okay.
actually a hard disk controller. Those days, you don't get hard
Yes.
disk controllers
Yeah.
off the shelf.
Yes.
So, in about 92, uh, I got acquired. My company got acquired by a UK-based company that was setting up shop in India.
Okay.
They were actually my customer. I built an ATE for them, and so
Yeah.
they had known me for about 6 months in me building that special
Right.
automatic test equipment for them.
Uh-huh.
And they acquired my company. Of course, much later, I came to know of the term. It was basically an acqui-hire. They
Okay.
basically wanted me, so they acquired my company.
Right.
I was with that company. It was called MTL Instruments.
Okay.
It was a UK-based company,
Okay.
and I was with them for 10 years,
Okay.
heading up their India operations.
Okay.
And kind of growing the organization, growing the team. So from my startup life, I moved on to another company which also was starting up in India. Of course, it was a large organization in the UK, but it was starting up in India, and so I was part of the journey of growing that organization
Okay.
and finally heading that organization as well. Then in 2001, I left MTL and co-founded a company called iSoftTech.
Okay.
It was founded by a great person, Ray Stata,
Okay.
who also is the founder chairman of Analog Devices, the $5 billion
Okay. Okay.
IC manufacturing company.
Oh.
So in iSoftTech, we set out to build products for startups in the US.
Okay.
Of course, much later the term product development outsourcing came, but That's what we were doing.
Okay.
We started doing in 2001. We built it, had a great time for about 7 years.
Mhm.
Then we got acquired by Sasken Communications,
Yeah.
a Bangalore-based
Yeah.
telecom expert. And I was with Sasken for 2 years, heading the networks business unit.
Yeah.
Then I left Sasken to again go join another startup called Vortex Engineering.
Okay.
Ray Stata, who had founded iSoftTech and invested in iSoftTech,
Yeah.
was investing in Vortex, and he had requested me to consider joining Vortex. So Vortex was a very early stage Indian startup where we
Yeah.
were trying to build a green, low cost, low power ATM
Yeah.
to make financial inclusion a reality in the Indian rural market.
Okay.
So I went on, joined a very early, the company at a very early stage, pre-revenue, pre-product stage. We had again a gala time about 7-8 years there, where we raised about 80 crores of investment from various investors.
Okay.
We built the product. We had a great run. We at that time in 2014 when I left, we had about selling about 1,000 odd ATMs per year.
Okay.
A good time.
Good time.
Subsequently, it's just that we had two sets of investors. We had differences of views on the strategy of the company. So Ray and I and a few others left, while the other investors took over, kind of bought out those
Yeah.
investments, those shares, and it continues. And I continue to have a good connect still with Vortex, and continue to support them
Okay.
from the outside. Then I joined another startup heading their India operations. The startup was called Altiscale.
Yeah.
It was a US Palo Alto based startup founded by Ravi Stata. Ravi was the CTO of Yahoo
Okay.
and considered a founder of Hadoop. And he left Yahoo, founded Altiscale, where we were offering Hadoop as a service. So I joined their India operations to head the India operations.
Yeah.
About 2 years later, we got acquired by SAP,
Yeah.
and I moved on to join Newstar. So that's my
Journey.
long journey.
Yeah. 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 So Vijay, I would like to request you to just bring your mic a bit close to your mouth, but I think maybe you can also adjust it through the arm.
Okay.
Yeah. And because now when you're speaking, you are just facing me and the mic is bit in the direction. I'm a bit scared that the audio will not be as good as it should be. Okay. So that was quite a big journey. Now, I would like to know is that you have seen the golden times, a time when the IT was at peaks. When I remember that I used to hear that, one company used to go for a campus recruitment and used to hire the entire batch. And from that point, we have come to now this time, the current times when we are not seeing that kind of aggressive hiring by companies. So first of all, why that changed? And do you see that happening again in near future?
Okay. So if you step back a moment and if you look
Yeah.
at any industry,
Yeah.
you would normally find the industries going through various phases of growth.
Yeah.
There would be a very early stage where there would be someone is offering a new business model, a new product, a new technology,
Yeah.
and they're just starting to offer that, and there are a few takers. There are these early adopters
Yeah.
who would use those products, services, and feel good about it,
Yeah.
and would get benefited by that.
Yeah.
And if that is successful, the company would then, or the product or the technology would then go through a growth phase,
Okay.
which is a phase, ideally, which is a phase of very rapid growth.
Mhm.
It could last for 1 year, it could last for 10 years,
Mhm.
whatever. And then once that technology or product or market matures,
Mhm.
it reaches a maturity stage, which would be where you would not see much growth,
Okay.
but you would still see a large volume of transactions happening.
Okay. Yeah.
And then it would go through an end of phase where maybe other technologies will come disrupt, and this technology will go away and another technology will take over.
Okay.
So it would basically, this is a cycle followed by almost all products.
Okay.
If you take this, let's say the smartphone era, again you had a very small adoption phase during the iPhone 1 phase.
Yeah.
And it took off really well. And it kind of then enabled a phase of phenomenal growth for about 10 years.
Yes.
Now you're probably reaching a stage where
It's
the
it,
smartphone
yes.
market is kind of stabilizing.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what happened for the IT outsourcing industry as well.
Okay.
From the India perspective, the IT growth was predominantly fueled by the software services business.
Yeah.
And that started out maybe with Infosys and the TCSs starting out, seeing some adoption. And early 90s is when the real takeoff happened.
Yeah.
Went on maybe for about 15 years, fueled by the what is called as this Y2K problem era, and then the real rapid growth,
Yeah.
which also not only fueled software services, but you also enabled companies to move to India
Yeah.
to build their own captive centers. And in some sense, this opportunity, which was a mix of software services growth as well as finding India to have so much talent, that this also being another place where companies can build large competent teams and talent to build out their products.
Right.
So this phase, especially driven by the software services, enabled the Indian IT industry to grow rapidly. During that phase, obviously, when you have such a lot of growth, you will have such a lot of need,
Yeah.
demand for people. And
Yeah.
that fueled this huge growth.
Yeah.
Later, I would suppose at this time we have reached a phase of a more mature growth phase for the industry. A typical more mature growth phase would be, let's say, 6 to 10% of growth,
Okay.
as opposed to a 30% growth which was seen in the early times. And it would also mean that if the growth is tapering, your demand in
Yeah.
terms of people requirement also tapers.
Yeah.
And that is coupled with that, it's also now we are reaching a phase of more automation, AI and the like, which is also enabling more work to be done with less people.
Yeah.
And that coupled with reduced growth is letting us see this reduced offtake of
Yeah.
engineering, fresh engineering talent into this industry. But we should remember that it's the rate of growth has reduced, but the volume would still be high.
Yeah. So is it safe to say that we will never see that kind of aggressive hiring again in near future? Is it safe to say that?
I mean, it's never safe to say anything. I mean, you're betting something, but
Yeah.
I would suppose that in the IT outsourcing industry,
Yeah.
it is probably a safe bet to say that you're not going to see that kind of growth,
Yeah.
and hence that kind of hiring requirement
Okay.
coming up in the near future with the visibility we have in technology today.
Yeah. Because I see now, of course, few people who are in maybe looking for the options. They are in last years of their schools, maybe class 11, 12th, and they ask, okay, what should I do? Should I go for engineering? Should I go for MBBS or doctors? And now even parents are not very sure, because when they see other people, okay, yeah, because people who are in colleges, they're saying, it's not that good now. So for them, it's a bit of concern. But having said that, I mean, if someone asks you, it is still a viable option for someone who is maybe in class 12th, that should he opt for engineering for his career?
My view is this. When a particular industry is in a growth phase, there is a lot of requirement, which means that
Yeah.
even people who are not enthusiastic about that particular area as a career,
Yeah.
or people who are not yet ready for that, still would get consumed because the demand, the requirement is far greater than the supply of engineers. But as an industry matures, it becomes more selective in hiring, which means that people who are still passionate about this area would still find it interesting and find an opportunity.
Yeah.
People who are still good at this, they will still find the opportunities.
Yeah.
But people who don't like it, or who want to get into this just for
Career
say,
option.
a job,
Yes.
I think they now have a lot more areas opening up for them.
Okay.
which might enable them to go pursue the career of their interest rather than looking for this as simply an area to get a job.
Got it. Yeah. One of the questions which I wanted to ask you is about the startup journey, which you had a lot of success with. And now the stat says that almost 80% of startups fail by some or other reason within the first 1 year. And very few cross the 2 years mark. And there might be hardly a couple of who will even go further and maybe they cross 3 years mark. So what are the core challenges for these startups that they start up with a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of passion, and but they die out like very soon. So can you explain exactly why the lot of startup fails?
Sure. If you actually look at a startup journey,
Yeah.
what really happens? Basically, what we are trying to do in the startup journey is we have a premise
Yeah.
that a particular product or a technology or a business model has a phenomenal opportunity to scale.
Yeah.
Big.
Yeah.
So that's a premise, untested premise really.
Yeah.
Untested in the context of are customers going to use it? Am I going to build the technology capable of doing that? Am I going to be able to build a team to make that happen? So none of this is sure, but we have an idea in our mind that
Yes.
something is going to work out right. Using that idea, we start trying out. When we jump into that and when we start trying out, we get to know whether the technology or an idea or the product or the market, can I build that? Is the technology viable? Am I able to sell to more and more people? Am I getting traction, in other words? And is the market liking this?
Yeah.
Is the scale high? So when I take a premise to test these things, it's very obvious that not all of them are going to succeed.
Okay.
Let's take a few examples, right? Earlier, even let's take the e-commerce example.
Yeah.
Then I'm sure Flipkarts and the Snapdeals and so many other Infibeam today and what it was earlier, there were hundreds of companies that started out saying that let me test out the premise of e-commerce in India. When they tested it in India, it has already been tested in the US
Yes.
and elsewhere and found
Yeah.
successful. So you're actually testing a market readiness
Yeah.
for an already known
Product.
or a business model.
Yeah.
Even there, you would find that 100 companies would have started that.
Yeah.
There are only a few companies who would be able to scale up some to build a team to deliver, to build technology that helps them do that,
Yeah.
build the partner ecosystem to make that happen,
Yeah.
raise money to make all this happen,
Yeah.
be successful in the market. So, in some sense, out of that 100, only one finally succeeded very well.
Yeah.
Maybe two or three would partially succeed, and the rest would not be able to. So, in some sense, the premise, the testing of the premise on these various parameters, ability to raise fund, ability to build a team, ability to build technology, ability to sell that to a wider customer base, only some will be able to scale and others would not.
Yeah.
And that's the whole excitement and the fun of
Yeah.
the startup journey, right?
Yeah. So like because you have started a lot of startups and you reached that success. So basically, if you want to guide someone, for say someone who is new to this industry and who wants to start his own company, what would be the key factors or the key points he should take into consideration before he or she should start his journey in startups?
Okay. So, firstly, my success in my startup has been very, very small, right? Considering
Yeah.
the industry thing, and that's the way it's going to be. There are only going to be maybe 0.001% of the companies which reach the success of the Google
Yeah.
or Facebook or Flipkart.
Yeah, that's true.
There will be a lot who will die. There will be some who will be acquired and be used, the technology or the product be used through some other larger organization, or some would meander, just surviving, not really growing phenomenally, but maybe managing to live on its own. Uh, at my experience in all my startup journey, I'd had a lot of exhilarating times, a lot of very anxious moments, lot of times when I would think that will I be able to raise a fund to survive the next month?
Yeah.
And you go over them, and you are, if you're lucky, luck plays a part here as well. If you're lucky, you overcome that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you succumb to it. So at the end, anyone who starts a startup need to have that passion, need to enjoy that, and need to be aware that you're making an attempt, that you're on an idea that you're passionate about, and you will have to be willing to love that journey of the excitement, exhilaration, the anxieties, the 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 sorrow of failure, or a sorrow of a misstep. You should be willing to take all that in your stride and try it out.
Yeah.
And with my experience, if I get a chance, if I have an idea, I would not stop a moment to
You know.
try one more time.
Yeah, that's very well said. Now, if you see the current trend in the industry, like we discussed now, they are not hiring as good as they were hiring earlier, and also there is some sense of change, which is I can see from last couple of years, especially in the IT services. Now the clients are not willing to pay a lot of money for the job where they were earlier. They were very happy to pay the same amount of money, and even the technology kind of point of view, the technologies like big data and AI and other sort, they have sort of took over the job. Now this question I ask a lot of people, there's what are these changes now which combined with the changes in the US management, changes with the visa policies, is this change is going to continue further, or have we now in the path of stabilization, we have reached a stable stage now?
Uh, you cannot expect any stability in any industry, right?
Right.
I would suppose that the pace of change has only accelerated over time.
Yeah.
Over the years, the world has indeed become flat,
Yeah.
and the barriers have, at least barrier to technology, barrier to access, availability, and the like, has been broken down significantly.
Yeah.
Which means that we are going to see only more and more change. So there is, when
Okay.
you say stability, what would you mean as stability is the question, right?
Yeah.
I would suppose the change is a new norm. Like for example, if the IT industry has had a great run for 15 years, it's going to be very difficult for any new breakthroughs like that to have such a great run for such a long time.
Yeah.
It's going to be shorter time frame of great runs, or a new technology coming to disrupt it.
Yeah.
So it's I would think that it would only increase, and
Okay.
in that sense stability is going to be less, and that's the
Yeah.
new norm.
So this, like, there were a lot of news regarding the layoffs in past couple of years, especially for senior management people who are say 10 plus experience, and that reached till maybe 15 and plus, and this happened in across a lot of companies, and so that's made a sense of insecurity among people that IT is not good once you cross certain age. Like I said, like you have seen great success and you have crossed three decades, so obviously you are an outlier in that case. But I have seen it like many cases that once you cross that 10 or 12 year mark, and then maybe your incentive becomes a lot, and so company prefers to hire freshers or maybe people with less experience as compared to hiring in people with that experience. So is that a really a cause of issue or a maybe concern for people who cross that golden that 10-year 12-year mark?
A great question. The real, if you look at it from a company's viewpoint, at
Yeah.
the end of the day, or even if you look at it from an individual's viewpoint, let me start off with an individual's viewpoint.
Yeah.
As I grow in experience, the question I need to keep asking is, am I learning, am I contributing commensurate with my experience.
Yeah.
If I am doing the same work as someone who's half my experience,
Hmm.
then what is the value anyone is going to have with me and my higher years of experience?
Right.
So, in any industry, more so in the technology industry, the changes happening so rapidly.
Yeah.
In fact, when I started out in the 80s, we used to write in assembly language. I had started out with Fortran a bit,
Okay.
C, Pascal, C++,
Okay.
Java, and now things have
Yeah.
changed
Yeah.
further
Yeah.
with Python and Ruby and so on. And even from a technology perspective, right? When we started out, the software was just about coming in,
Yeah.
and even ERP started appearing only in late 90s. And now things have moved to the cloud, things have moved to the AI and the like. And so, as I gain experience, the question really every one of us will have to ask ourselves is: are we also continuing to learn to bring our experience to make a difference to our work?
Yeah.
And if I am not bringing in that difference, then why would I be required to do that with my experience and my higher compensation
Yeah.
that is expected to be the experience? So in short, experience cannot guarantee an improved return to the employer.
Yeah.
And for the same reason, an experience doesn't mean that just because I have more experience, I need to get more salary.
Yeah.
Or for that matter, I need to have more responsibility. So it's a matter
Yeah.
of getting to know that you need to keep adding value, and anyone who stops learning or who stops adding value really will, the company would lose the value
For that
them.
person, yeah. Very good, well answer. We have seen a lot of changes happening in the US visa program, and not only that, the entire outlook of the US management, especially the political management, changed towards outsourcing the job. As you know, that 2/3 of the India's business comes from the US, and now in last, especially with the new political movement or political, you can say, changes in US, that has sort of took a, I mean, people are more concerned about it now than ever before. What kind of challenges you see with this current changes happening in the US and their sort of a outlook towards outsourcing and the impact on India?
Okay, so in my view, I would like to break this into a
Yeah,
couple
yeah, please.
issues, right?
Yeah.
On the one hand, if it is sending people to the US to work out of US, it is really labor arbitrage, right?
Yeah.
At the end, there is a geography arbitrage that were considered earlier when things moved to India, cost is lower in India, and hence that arbitrage, the geography arbitrage, helped companies save money.
Yeah.
In a similar way, when a person moves from India to the US, if he ends up getting paid less than what would typically be paid
To a US
to
guy.
an US
Yeah.
employee, that is again a labor arbitrage of a different kind. Any arbitrage, as the world becomes flatter and as the barriers gets broken, such arbitrages will vanish. Today, the growth in India, in the IT that is happening or in the captive centers that is happening, is not necessarily happening only because of the geography arbitrage, but because of the talent available here,
Yeah.
enabling companies to grow rapidly and build technologies for the market. And in the similar context, if there is a demand supply issue, then bringing in people into a country for the sake of managing the demand, not for the sake of reducing
Yeah.
cost arbitrages, but for the sake of demand supply management,
Yeah.
that would be sustainable, not the cost arbitrage. That's my view. And another point that I believe is happening is, if the world GDP grows, if every country grows at a healthy pace, it enables their citizens to gain by that growth and see growth for themselves. That has been happening during the last 20 years.
Yeah.
In recent times, maybe in this decade, that has reduced.
Yeah.
And it clearly will bring in concerns to every country, right? If you look at every country individually, if the people living in that country are not seeing growth for themselves, there is going to be pressure to build barriers to safeguard the interests of the citizens. And I think that when the growth tapers off across a country or across the world, these barriers, protectionist barriers, are going to get raised.
Yeah.
And I would suppose that there is no easy way out of it. That's reality. Because at the end, a politician or a leader for a country has interest in making sure that their country grows
Grows.
and their people gain by that growth.
Yeah. Now, Vijay, as we discussed, like IT, maybe engineering as a career option. So let's talk more about it. Uh, Earlier, the notion was once you're done with your schooling, somehow get into engineering college. You work hard, you go through entrance exams and other things like that, and once you reach engineering, finish it with certain points and get a job. Get into campus placement or somehow get into industry by one way or other, and you are set for life. That notion changed recently. Is it still, if someone goes into an IT as a fresher, is it guaranteed that he will be there till he retires?
Okay. So, interesting question, and obviously, such a guarantee no longer exists.
Okay.
And this is again related to the growth opportunities in an industry and the like.
Yeah.
Uh, Maybe just taking a step back and looking at it not just from an engineering perspective but from a workforce perspective
Yeah.
or an employment opportunity perspective. Uh, what I believe will happen is the industry exposure kind of widens in the sense that earlier computer science was probably the only industry that
Yeah.
was consuming so much of employment.
Correct.
But as India grows, as India's GDP growth increases and India becomes a larger country in the context of economy,
Yeah.
the opportunities opens up in not just computer science but in a wider variety of areas,
Yeah.
including support services. Like, for example, in the recent times, and maybe in the last few years, there has been phenomenal growth for e-commerce delivery solutions or food delivery or cab drivers, because the support industry grows and that brings in opportunity for a lot of people in these areas. So in some sense, as a country matures and goes more becomes more developed,
Yeah.
the opportunity widens, the opportunity areas widens, where maybe the same number of engineers would get consumed.
Yeah.
So the rate of increase might be less, but the number of engineers consumed in the industry would continue to be high. But at the same time, more opportunities opens up
Yeah.
for other services. As India grows, maybe car manufacturing increases, which means that you would start having more people joining the manufacturing area. And even areas like retail,
Yeah.
where the number of shops that are available, commercial establishments increases, and that kind of brings in opportunities. So in some sense, I believe that the opportunity opens up into a wider domain, and that is why, like I alluded to earlier, people, if they follow their heart and go to an area that they like,
Yeah.
they will still be able to grow.
Yeah. But still, like, it is not as secure as your, like my dad say, government job.
Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
secure, and I think it also has to do with the what we call as the age demography of a country. Right?
Yes, yes.
Like if you take Japan, clearly the number of people in the 40 to 60 years of age are more than the number of people between 20 to 40 years of age.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it means that there are not going to be too many workforces joining the work, and the people will continue to do the same work they had been doing
For a long time.
for a longer time,
Yeah.
which would also mean that their compensation is not going to increase
Okay.
as much,
Yeah.
and they would continue to do the same work for a longer periods of time, which will definitely lead to frustrations, which will lead to kind of dissatisfaction or a kind of an acceptance that that's the way the life is going to be.
Yeah.
And I would suppose that in India we may not have this problem of the age demographics shifting that way,
Okay.
but it would also mean that as more people come in, the more experienced people will have to compete with them in
Yeah.
terms of delivering more,
Yeah.
adding more value. If not, the instability would
Yeah.
be faced by them in the later years.
Yeah, yeah. On the same line, like we know, mostly every company has that pyramid structure of the employees. Like we have a lot of people in the lower end with experience of 0 to 3 4 years, and then in the mid level 5 to 10 years, and then on the top very less people. And I think it's safe to say that nowadays it's mostly about 80 to 90% people lie within the experience of 0 to 5 years, and maybe say 5% in above that and five in the top. Now the question is, will these 80% people who are in the experience level of 2 to 5 years will be there after 5 years? That means the pyramid will be inverted, and we will have like more people in the experience of 10 to 15 years on the top, and very few people. Then how it will be affecting the company's structuring?
A very interesting question. There are multiple dynamics here, right?
Yeah.
You are talking about a pyramid structure in one organization.
Yes. Yes.
As the country grows, the number of organizations that there is in a country increases.
Yes.
So, in
Yes.
other words, this pyramid, the people who grow, might end up
Okay.
going to another organization
Okay.
and start taking up that. In other words, rather than talking about the pyramid, you will have to talk about the number of pyramids that are also getting generated.
Okay.
So as long as there is commensurate growth there,
Yeah.
the people who are growing in experience will find
More opportunities.
opportunities for the increased experience they have gained.
Yes.
If that growth reduces, then just like we talked about Japan, the
Yeah.
pyramid would still be there from a compensation standpoint,
Yeah.
but the experience wise, it would get inverted. So it would end up being an inverted pyramid, kind of, or at least a square or a rectangle from an experience standpoint,
Yeah.
but it would continue to be a pyramid from a compensation standpoint,
Yeah.
because that's the way any company can survive.
Yeah.
And that is where frustration starts building up for the more experienced people whose value of experience
Yeah.
is not converting into an increased compensation.
Yeah. At the last, I would like to know the future of our IT industry in India. What are your thoughts? Where we are, going into in next couple of years, or what are the key challenges, in the near future?
I expect the industry to continue to grow.
Okay.
Like we see from an IT outsourcing industry perspective, it might taper off to a growth of about 10% plus or minus 2%.
Okay.
From the highs of 30%
Yeah.
over the last decades. Additionally, with the disruptions that are happening on the AI front
Yeah.
and automation, there is going to be continued pressure to automate as much as possible
Yeah.
and use the people resources for much more value-added works than in the past, and that's going to be a continued journey, I guess.
Yeah.
So in some sense, that's going to bring in pressure on, even when we see a 10% growth at the top line of the revenue, you may not see a 10% growth in the workforce.
Okay.
You might either see a 2 to 4% growth in the workforce,
Okay.
which means that the number of people consumed by the IT industry is going to probably remain kind of static, or at best growing very, very slightly at about 2
Right.
to 3%.
Right.
Having said that, on the other hand, we are also going to have more companies coming in,
Okay.
not necessarily in the IT outsourcing industry, but in captive opportunities, new products, new opportunities of growth in a fast growing economy like India.
Yeah.
That, I believe, will help us continue to grow at a decent pace. But
Yeah.
in the end of the day, I believe that this is the time in the coming years, the GDP growth for the entire world is going to kind of taper off.
Okay.
Growth, the fast high growth seen in the last decade
Yeah.
is going to go down. Coupled with the fact that the GDP growth is going to happen with more automation rather than more people getting added to the industry.
Okay.
So the pressure on employment, I believe, is continuing to
Yeah.
grow.
I think earlier when we used to get, forecast by these big companies that they used to say that we will hire 10% more people and our revenue will grow by 10%.
Correct.
So the amount of revenue will increase by the amount of people
Yeah.
you hire. It was like
Correct.
perfect ratio.
Correct.
Now they're saying that we will hire only 1%,
Yes, exactly.
but the revenue will be up by 8%.
Exactly.
This is a new norm now.
That's the new norm. Exactly.
Okay. We have seen a couple of recessions in last one decade, famously because of 2008 and maybe another, not on that big scale as it was in 2008, but maybe in the 2012 or 13 there was another small recession. Do you think it's a cycle which which will continue in the next few years?
Yeah, definitely. I think the cycle comes because during growth, the opportunity to grow is there.
Okay.
And it means that capacity gets built,
Yeah.
anticipating growth.
Yeah.
And clearly, growth in any area cannot continue forever.
Okay.
So, some areas are going to grow, which means that you build capacity on that and it fuels more growth in other allied areas.
Yeah.
And so, when a growth tapers off in that particular industry, it clearly is going to lead to a depression because you have built capacity, you have added more people,
Yeah.
but you're not seeing the growth, which means that you will have to kind of contain your expenses or your growth plans.
Yeah.
It means that that is going to lead to a tapering off.
Yeah.
If the growth was much higher or if the capacity building was way more than what is required,
Yeah.
that might even lead to a recession. Else, it might kind of taper off.
Okay.
So, I would suppose it's a cycle that's going to continue. With the increase in technology and increase in sophistication, I suppose the cycle time shrinks.
Okay.
What was happening every 30 years
Will happen
probably
in-
will happen every 4-5 years.
That means we are now about to see another recession in a couple of more years.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Vijay. Thanks a lot for your time. I think we got a lot of insights into the startup industry, the IT industry, especially the hiring part, and the future of the people how they continue in the IT industry. So thanks a lot for your time, and I really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Aman. I enjoyed our conversation as well. Appreciate you having me on your show.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.